All of a sudden, Jimi Hendrix is back in the news, and everyone is talking about him. After more than half a century, Washington state officially acknowledged what music lovers had known all along. Now, for the first time since before COVID, a major event is taking place on American stages. Musicians are vying for a spot in it. One legend is even taking time out of his retirement to participate. The current situation involving Jimi Hendrix has the internet in a frenzy. The birth of Jimi Hendrix took place on November 27, 1945. Seattle. The parents were Lucille and Al. They battled frequently and suffered financially. When Jimi was born, Lucille was just 17. Al served in Alabama's military. He sought for leave, but was locked up for more than a month and was not permitted to return home. Jimi had a chaotic early life. Each parent drank excessively. Their house was not stable. The authorities removed and placed 4 of his siblings in foster care. Jimi was temporarily placed in California to live with a family friend. When Al got back from the war in 1945, he brought Jimi back to Seattle. Al and Lucille separated in 1951. Al was granted custody of Jimi and Leon, his younger brother. Jimi was 15 years old in 1958 when Lucille passed away from liver illness. Al forbade the lads from going to the burial. Instead, he replied, "This is how men cope with loss," and handed them whiskey. Jimi found solace in music at that time. It had always captivated him. He used to carry a broom around at school and act like it was a guitar. Nothing happened when a social worker saw it and inquired if the school could get him one. While helping his dad clean up a house in 1957, Jimi, then 15 years old, discovered a broken ukulele with one string. He could keep it, according to the resident woman. Jimi learned to play by himself, enjoying the music of Elvis Presley. Al finally purchased a decent guitar for him when his mother passed away. He used it as an escape. He studied alone, listening to early rock and blues. He left Garfield High School in 1959 when he was just 17 years old. He was just interested in music. The Velvet Ones and the Rockin' Kings were among the local bands he performed with. He struggled financially and didn't have a reliable work. Even though he continued to play, he occasionally slept in abandoned cars. He paid great attention to other musicians. The guitar with his fangs, Butch Snipes, was one of them. He adopted the motion as part of his act after copying it. Jimi was 19 when he was arrested for riding in a stolen vehicle in 1961. He was incarcerated for a week. He had to decide between joining the army or going to prison. He enlisted in the army and joined the 101st Airborne Division. The Screaming Eagles had a reputation that drew Hendrix in. During the D-Day landings in World War II, this division participated in combat. At Fort Ord in California, he began his basic training. In August 1961, he finished his training. It turned into a private. He was then sent to Kentucky's Fort Campbell. Hendrix found life in the army difficult. The rules and the organization both annoyed him. He wrote to his father about how much he detested life in the military. He did, however, have one thing that sustained him. He gave the name Betty Jean to his Red Dane electro guitar. Whenever he had the chance, he played it. At Fort Campbell, Hendrix met Billy Cox, another soldier. Cox was a bass player. They immediately clicked through music and became good friends. The King Casuals was the name of the band they formed together. They began giving performances in the local towns and around the base. Even in uniform, Hendrix was preparing for what lay next. After only 13 months in the army, he was discharged in 1962. His 26th parachute jump resulted in an ankle injury, which was the official explanation. Although the army claimed he was no longer able to satisfy the physical demands, other documents indicate that he may have had performance issues. He did not perform well in physical training, slept between shifts, skipped bed inspections, and failed shooting drills. He even displayed homosexual impulses, according to some stories, which at the time might have resulted in dismissal. In spite of everything, Hendrix was discharged with honors. Following their discharge from the military, Hendrix and Billy Cox relocated to Clarksville, Tennessee. They desired to continue performing music. They began playing in local clubs and continued to go by the name King Casuals. This marked the beginning of Hendrix's distinctive stylistic development. Because he was left-handed, he played a right-handed guitar upside down. He also began to play tricks with his teeth and behind his head. They were under tremendous pressure to amuse. According to Hendrix, they had higher expectations than just skill. Was looking for a show. You weren't asked back if you weren't noticeable. Some band leaders felt he was trying to steal the show because of his ostentatious style. However, Hendrix continued to advance his act. He performed on the Chitlin circuit as a backup guitarist from 1962 to 1965. Black artists could perform at these locations throughout the South, Midwest, and East Coast while segregation was in effect. It was difficult. Pay was frequently meager or non-existent. They occasionally received payment in food, according to Bobby Rush, who also performed. Jimi Hendrix considered himself stuck in January 1964. He had played behind other musicians for years, living under their spotlight and abiding by their rules. At this point, he desired greater authority over his songs and profession. So he decided something. In Harlem, he moved into the Hotel Teresa and quit doing support performances. He got to know Lithophane Priggen there. She was known as Faye. She was his lover and a member of the Harlem music community. She provided him with a place to stay, encouraged him to continue, and more. He also met Arthur and Albert Allen during that time. They were twins with strong ties to the clubs in Harlem. Hendrix began playing in local places, sitting in with other bands, and touring the city in an attempt to get recognition. He participated in the amateur night competition at the Apollo Theater in February 1964. First place went to him. That boosted his confidence. It demonstrated his ability to lead a throng by himself. He was able to get an audition with Ronnie Isley shortly after that victory thanks to a connection from the Joe Tex Band. After impressing him, Hendrix was offered a position as the guitarist for the backup band of the Isley Brothers. He immediately gave his consent. It was a true advancement. Hendrix's first studio song was recorded in March 1964. It was titled Testify with the Isley Brothers and consisted of 2 parts. Despite its June release, the song failed to chart. But that was a beginning. He contributed to Don Covey's Mercy Mercy on guitar in May. Released in August, that song peaked at number 35 on the Billboard chart. Most of 1964 was spent on tour with the Isleys, but by October, Hendrix was sick of doing the same set every night. He quit the band because he wanted a change. He joined Little Richard's touring band shortly after. The Upsetters. They visited the city of Los Angeles in February 1965. Little Richard and Hendrix recorded a single there titled Don't Know What You Got, But It's Got Me. Don Covey wrote the song, which was published by VJ Records. It spent a week at number 92 on the charts, its lowest position. By then, Little Richard's reputation was beginning to fade. Rosa Lee Brooks is a vocalist Hendrix met while staying at the Wilcox Hotel in Hollywood. He accepted her invitation to play guitar on her single. UT was on the B-side, and My Diary was on the A-side. Arthur Lee was the author of both tunes. During the session, Hendrix met Lee and performed guitar on both tunes. After they became friends, Hendrix grew to be a major fan of Lee's band, Love. Hendrix first made an appearance on television in July 1965. He backed up vocalists Buddy and Stacy on the song Shotgun while playing with Little Richard's band on Night Train, a local program on Nashville's WLAC-TV. This footage is currently the oldest known live performance video of Hendrix. However, things with Little Richard weren't always easy. They argued a lot. Hendrix enjoyed taking center stage. His manner and gaudy attire were incongruous with Richard's persona. Richard's brother Robert dismissed Hendrix from the band at the end of July. The first recording deal that Hendrix signed was on July 27, 1965. It involved Juggy Murray at Sue Records and Copa, a management firm. He then recorded another single and took a temporary break from the Eisenhower. As the B-side, it was Move Over and Let Me Dance with Have You Ever Been Disappointed. Curtis Knight and Hendrix met at a motel later that year. The Squire was an R&B group that Knight fronted. Hendrix stayed with them for 8 months. In October 1965, Hendrix had already signed a 2-year contract with Sue Record, but Knight and Hendrix recorded How Would You Feel with Welcome Home on the B-side. On October 15, 1965, he also inked a new contract, this one with Ed Chalpin, also for 3 years. The contract endured, but the collaboration did not. Later in his career, it caused Hendrix troubles. In addition to performing with Curtis Knight and the Squires, Hendrix collaborated with other musicians. Joey D and the Starlighta accompanied him on tour. King Curtis was his recording partner. He also contributed to the song Help Me, which was written by Ray Sharp. The song was divided into two sections. The first composition credits for Hendrix came in 1966. Hornet's Nest and Knock Your, two instrumentals he composed, were both released as singles by Curtis Knight and the Squires. By 1966, Hendrix was prepared to leave the R&B scene. In New York, he relocated to Greenwich Village. The creative energy in the neighborhood was powerful. It was full of musicians, artists, and fresh concepts. Hendrix got a job at Café Hoa as a performer. McDougal Street. Jimmy James and the Blue Flames is the name of the new band he founded. Among them was Randy California, who went on to establish the band Spirit. All throughout New York, the Blue Flames performed. Hendrix's sound was shaped by their performances. He began trying out various looks and theatrical techniques. The band performed some of their final gigs together at Manhattan's Café Ogo in September 1966. They were a support band for a vocalist named John Hammond at the time. When Jimi Hendrix arrived at London Airport on September 24, 1966, he had very little. He was carrying a guitar, some hair curlers, a change of clothes, and 40 borrowed dollars. The airport had recently changed its name to ETHRO. Although Hendrix was unaware of it at the time, this journey would alter his life. He had performed in New York City as Jimmy James at tiny shows earlier that summer. He performed one evening at Greenwich Village's Café Hoa, when former Animals bassist Ches Chandler was present. Chandler was trying to find fresh talent. When he witnessed Hendrix perform, he realized he had discovered something unique. 12 days after Jimmy's arrival in London, everything came together for Jimi Hendrix. On October 6, 1966, it took place. Chandler hired musicians right away. At an audition for the new Animals, he got to know Noel Redding. Jimmy was pleased with his understanding of blues progression. Appreciated his quirky hairdo as well. Chandler called for percussionist Mitch Mitchell. Mitchell had recently lost his job with the Blue Flames and Georgie fame. Because they both like rhythm and blues, he and Jimmy clicked. Additionally, Chandler contributed to Jimmy's image. He recommended spelling Jimmy as Jimmy instead. It changed the name's appearance and added a more distinctive flair. Immediately the band began to play. A week later, they went on a four-show tour with French singer Johnny Hallyday. On October 23, they recorded their first single, Hey Joe, at London's Delane Lee Studios. Jimmy had only been in England for a month, but recording wasn't simple. The studio equipment was hampered by their loud Marshall amps. Jimmy's singing made him anxious as well. On November 2, the B-side to the single, Stone Free, was recorded. With the band, it was Jimmy's first original composition. In order to obtain money from publishing rights, Chandler had urged him to compose it. It was difficult to acquire a record deal despite their talent. Kit Lambert and Chris Stamp, the manager of The Who, eventually signed them to their new label, Track Records. On December 16, 1966, the first single was issued through Polydor because Track was still a new song. At number 41, Hey Joe made his debut in the UK charts. It remained on the chart for 10 weeks after peaking at number 6. In order to increase the song's visibility, Jimmy also made appearances on television programs such as Ready, Steady, Go, and Top of the Pops. He had previously worked in small bars in New York as a backup guitarist. He was now on the rise to fame. It was Chas Chandler's plan. He wanted Hendrix to be seen by the appropriate audience. Jimmy was only a week old when Chandler took him to London Polytechnic, where Cream was performing, on October 1, 1966. Jimmy requested if he may go up on stage with them. Both of them concurred. The audience was astounded when he performed Howlin' Wolf's Killing Floor. Backstage following the song, Eric Clapton was stunned and unable to speak. He told Chandler, "You never told me he was that fucking good," as he lit a cigarette. In the middle of November, Jimmy was performing at the Bag O'Nails Club. Stars including Paul McCartney, John Lennon, Mick Jagger, Jeff Beck, Pete Townsend, and Brian Jones were among the attendees. What they were witnessing was beyond their comprehension. Recalling the scene, Kevin Ayers claimed that everyone was yelling in disbelief. Jimmy and Kathy Etchingham, his girlfriend, moved into 34 Montague Square at that time. Ringo Starr was the owner of the apartment. It was also the residence of Chandler and his girlfriend. At prestigious clubs like the Scotch of St. James, which is close to Buckingham Palace, Jimmy performed. There, the Rolling Stones and the Beatles had separate tables. Chandler's goal had been accomplished. In 2 months, he turned Hendrix into London's most talked-about band. However, not everything went as planned. Jimi was fervent and had strong ideas about the sound he wanted his music to have. In the initial Hey Joe studio sessions, Chandler requested that he turn down his amplifiers. That caused a huge outburst. Jimi yelled that he couldn't work in such a setting. He suggested that he return to New York. Chandler remained composed. He was carrying Jimi's passport and return ticket in his pocket after leaving the visa office. Then he put them on the mixing desk and shouted, "Fuck off back to America, then." In another, he just said, "Piss off." "All right, you called my bluff," Jimi remarked, laughing as he glanced at him. The way they will collaborate was established at that very time. Jimi asked to be free. Chandler let him have his space while keeping the conversation on course. On June 8, the true turning point occurred. At the Monterey Pop Festival on the 18th of 1967. The night had been warm. Although Hendrix was well known in London, the majority of Americans were still unaware of his name. This performance, he realized, could make all the difference. Just now, the Who smashed their instruments to end their performance. Jimi needed to do something more significant. He asked a stagehand for lighter fluid before he performed. It was concealed under his amplifier. The Rolling Stones' Brian Jones presented him to the audience. With Wild Thing, Jimi concluded his show. He went to his knees, flipped his guitar, and whispered, "Dude, I'm going to give up something I truly love." Then he filled his Stratocaster with lighter fluid and lit it on fire. He broke it 7 times and flung the charred fragments into the throng. The moment was photographed by photographer Ed Cariff. It became one of the most well-known pictures in rock history. Hendrix became a household name in his own nation after that night. According to music journalist Robert Christgau, this performance established a guitar style that is so potent that no one has been able to duplicate it since. Additionally, Jimi's debut record caused a stir. The UK saw the publication of Are You Experienced on May 12, 1967. Just behind Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, it peaked at number 2 during its 33-week run on the British charts. Hey Joe, Purple Haze, and The Wind Cries Mary were not included in the UK version. Rather, Hendrix's blues roots were evident in songs like Red House. The cover of the UK record didn't appeal to Jimi. A revised version of the album was issued in the United States by Reprise Records on August 23, 1967, following his victory at Monterey. In addition to new psychedelic cover art by Carl Ferris, the American release featured different tunes. The big singles were still included in this edition, however Red House, Remember, and Can You See Me were not. Although Purple Haze only made it to number 65 on the US singles list, the album was a huge underground hit. On the Billboard album chart, it rose to number 5 and remained there for 106 weeks. In the top 40, 76 of those weeks were recorded. Additionally, it topped the Billboard R&B chart for 70 weeks at number 10. To promote the record, Reprise paid $20,000, which at the time was a significant sum. Jimi Hendrix reached the pinnacle of his success in 1968. Electric Ladyland was released on October 16. The first album he created entirely was a double album. On His Own. It was his sole album to debut at the top of the Billboard charts. He demonstrated the evolution of his music with songs like Voodoo Child, Slight Return, Crosstown Traffic, and his rendition of Bob Dylan's All Along the Watchtower. His rendition of Watchtower was his sole Billboard Hot 100 Top 20 hit. Hendrix discovered elements in the song that no one else would have considered, according to Dylan himself. Another indication of mounting stress was this record. Jimi and Chas Chan, the man who brought him to England in the first place, had dissolved their business connection. Wished for greater authority. He was so engrossed in the sound that he frequently played bass himself rather than Noel Redding. Perfectionism was taking over his life. He purchased the former Generation Club in Greenwich Village in 1968 with his manager, Michael Jeffrey. Initially, their intention was to revive it as a music venue. Then, however, they discovered Jimi was spending about $300,000 a year on studio time. They made the decision to construct their own studio instead. It was dubbed Electric Lady Studio. John Storek, an architect, created it to fit Jimi's aesthetic. No corners of the rooms were sharp. Round windows, gentle lighting, and vibrant murals were all present. It was all supposed to feel peaceful and imaginative. However, there were issues with the project. Jimi was performing in places like Madison Square Garden and making up to $100,000 per event. Even so, it was insufficient. The studio took twice as long to complete, and by the end of 1970, it had cost about $1 million. Jimi made his stage debut there on June 15, 1970. Chris Wood and Steve Winwood were stuck in traffic with him. Nightbird Flying was recorded the following day. Even though the studio didn't open until August 25, Jimi had already departed for England. He didn't return. He never again saw the completed studio. It was earlier that summer that the Jimi Hendrix experience ended. They performed their final gig at the Denver Pop Festival on 29, 1969. Over 3 days, Mile High Stadium hosted the festival. The cost of admission was $6 per day, or $15 for the entire weekend. It included performers such as Creedence Clearwater Revival and Joe Cocker. At a press conference that day, Jimi announced Billy Cox as his new bassist. He was friends with Cox from the Army. The band was disintegrating, but Noel Redding and Mitch Mitchell were unaware of it. Roughly 2,500 of them began fighting with cops during their set. Officers used tear gas to keep the gathering under control. The stadium was blown into by the gas. The band and Jimi had to flee the stage. As soon as they fled in a panel van, terrified fans encircled it. The roof began to give way. According to Mitch Mitchell, they believed they were going to be crushed. Noel Redding returned to England by plane the following day. That was the end of the first encounter. Woodstock was Jimi's performance later that summer. He was scheduled to close the performance on August 17, 1969, a Sunday night. The event, however, was delayed. It was 8 a.m. when Jimi finally took the stage. Monday, the 18th of August. The majority of the crowd had left. Some 30,000 of the 400,000 people who had attended Woodstock remained. The question of whether Jimi should play the Star-Spangled Banner caused a quarrel backstage. Michael Jeffrey wished that he would not. He claimed the song started a riot in Dallas and was afraid it might start another one. However, Jimi was instructed to do it by music promoter Jerry Morrison after Jeffrey left. No one had ever heard the anthem played like Jimi did when he went onto the stage. His guitar sounded like cries, sirens, and explosives. The sound was loud, odd, and unforgettable. It was perceived by some as political. According to Jimi, it wasn't. He said that he was simply acting out his emotions. Jimi Hendrix's life began to alter in 1966. In that year, he took LS. First time. From that point on, his music started to sound completely own. Jimi's girlfriend, Kathy Etchingham, claims that he began to get visions and wanted to make music out of them. He made an effort to explain things, but it was usually incomprehensible. His visions came to life as he played the guitar, but these concepts had no connection to reality. LSD gave him access to a new door, which he continued to walk through. He wasn't reserved. By 1967, he was performing with acid in his mouth. When he took the stage at the Monterey Pop Festival, he was high on LSD. He lit his guitar on fire that evening. Even while it stunned the audience and garnered international attention, it wasn't merely for show. That instance demonstrated the extent of his willingness to travel. Music wasn't the only thing he was after. He was doing LSD on a daily basis by the late 1960s. Cocaine, amphetamines, hashish, and marijuana had all been used. When he was on tour, these medicines were always with him. They influenced his voice. From that world emerged songs like Purple Haze. Songs like A Merman I Should Turn to Be, 1983, portrayed surreal tales that sounded like nightmares. According to biographer Charles Cross, Jimi had a stronger connection to the drug culture than other celebrities. The hallucinogenic atmosphere he lived in was reflected in his songs. Few others, however, saw another side of him. Hendrix's alcoholism was a major issue. Something altered as he drank. According to those close to him, he got upset. The quiet and tranquility had vanished. In the late 1960s, one of the worst incidents occurred. He struck his girlfriend Carmen Barrera with a bottle of vodka during an intoxicated fight. Stitches were required for the cut over her eye. His drinking began at a young age. After leaving the army, he wasted nearly all of his $400 money in a single night of drinking in July 1962. He was once informed that drinking made him stupid. However, the issue grew worse as his fame increased. He was detained multiple times for fighting while intoxicated while on tour. Alcohol brought out a new side, according to those close to him. It was referred to as the greatest curse in one person's life. In contrast to the public persona that was displayed on stage, it resulted in mood swings and occasionally violent outbursts. Then the arrest in Toronto. Hendrix made their landing at Toronto International Airport on May 3, 1969. Discovered minor amounts of hashish and heroin in his luggage after stopping him. He was taken into custody at 1:30 p.m. Following tests verified the authenticity of the pills. On $10,000 bond, he was freed later that day. At Maple Leaf Gardens, he performed that evening. He altered the lyrics of Red House to include the following. Noel Redding and Mitch Mitchell later stated that they had been warned the day before about a planned bust. They thought the pills were planted by someone. During his trial in December 1969, Hendrix was required to wear formal clothing and trim his hair. The trial went on for 3 days. The jury deliberated for 8 hours before finding him not guilty. "Canada gave me the nicest Christmas present I've ever received," he remarked with a smile and a peace sign outside the courts. Peace, however, did not follow freedom. On September 3, 1970, while traveling through Europe, Gothenburg, Sweden, is where Hendrix came. On that day, Eva Sundqvist met him. He was the father of her son, James, she said. The child's birth occurred on January 5, 1970. They had been together for his January 1969 concert in Stockholm, she said. Although this was not the first time such a claim was made, the timing was more problematic. Already exhausted, Hendrix was emotionally spent and heavily drugged. The concert that evening was a train wreck. He couldn't remember the lyrics. From song to song, he drifted. Audience members reported he appeared very inebriated. It ended 2 weeks later. Hendrix was with Monica Danman, his girlfriend, on the evening of September 17. They had a glass of wine in her London flat in the Samarkand Hotel. Around 3 in the morning, they returned from a party. I spoke with Monica till around 7 in the morning. And eventually fell asleep. Jimmy then took 9 sleeping pills called Vesperac. It was 18 times the usual amount. Due to its potency, the substance was eventually outlawed in numerous nations. Hendrix had been ill in the final days of his life. He was tired and probably sick with the flu. He was also beginning to doubt others around him. The music industry made him feel stuck and uncertain of his future. He had just turned 27. This led to his inclusion in the infamous 27 Club, which also included Jim Morrison, Brian Jones, Janis Joplin, and later Kurt Cobain and Amy Winehouse. August 18, 1970, at 11:18 a.m. The hotel received an ambulance call. After 9 minutes, it showed up. The door was open, the crew discovered. There was still a gas fire. There was Hendrix in bed. Vomit was all over him. His airways were totally obstructed. Interestingly, Monica was not present, despite her later claim that she was always by his side. One of the worst scenes he had ever witnessed, according to ambulance worker Reggie Jones. It was dark, nearly black vomit that seeped through the pillow. After that, Hendrix was brought to St. Mary Abbott's Hospital. It was too late when the doctors attempted to revive him. He was declared deceased around 12:45 p.m. The questions remained. According to surgeon John Bannister, Hendrix's stomach and lungs gushed red wine. He thought that either at the hotel or while traveling to the hospital, Hendrix drowned. However, toxicological reports revealed that he had very little alcohol in his system. New questions prompted a private probe in 1992. Scotland Yard examined all parties and renewed the case. They once more concluded the case in 1993. No definitive answers were discovered. In 2025, Jimi Hendrix will once again be in the spotlight. Despite the fact that he died over 50 years ago, his influence endures. The state of Washington awarded him the Medal of Merit on March 18, 2025. The greatest honor the state may bestow on a civilian is this one. The Capitol building in Olympia served as the venue for the ceremony. The honor was presented by Governor Bob Ferguson, Secretary of State Steve Hobbs, and Lieutenant Governor Denny Heck. It contained information about Hendrix's life and music and was given to the Museum of P. Culture and his family. In the state and throughout Ferguson, Hendrix was regarded as one of the greatest guitarists of all time. Influenced current music in ways that stretched much beyond wah. On the road, somewhere in Olympia. With a band that performs Hendrix songs and honors his contributions, the Experian returned to North America. The event will be performed at the Chicago Theater tonight, March 21. Major cities throughout the United States are visited throughout the 33-day tour. There are several well-known people on the tour. Pantera and Black Label Society's Zakk Wylde is performing alongside Kenny Wayne Shepherd. They also include Eric Johnson, Marcus King, Christ One Kingfish, Devon Allman, and Samantha Fish all provide their unique sounds, yet they all work together to pay tribute to Hendrix's songs. The last show will include a special guest. The trip will conclude on April 12th at Atlanta's Fox Theater. Buddy Guy, a blues great, will take the stage again that evening. Last year, he announced that he was retiring from touring at the age of 88. This performance is not often seen. The fact that Hendrix himself referred to Buddy Guy as an inspiration makes it even more significant. A message regarding the occurrence was shared by Buddy Guy. Claimed to have vivid memories of meeting Hendrix in 1968 at a New York bar. He expressed gratitude for the memories and stated they became friends. He now comes back to commemorate Hendrix with a final performance. John McDermott is the company's catalog director. Ultimately, he claimed, his outstanding music is what unites people.